My name is Frances Delacroix, and I never thought I'd live long enough to be betrayed with a ballpoint pen. You hear about this sort of thing on the news: fraud, identity theft scams run by strangers. But when the handwriting on the loan application is nearly identical to your own and the perpetrator calls you mom, that's a betrayal no lawyer prepares you for. So before you sit down and listen, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to Grace's Truth. Because what you're about to hear isn't just a story, it's a lesson about trust, silence, and how the sharpest revenge is often written in ink. When my son Nathan married Lena, I told myself to be grateful. She was young, vibrant, had that polished edge women sometimes get from a hard past and a taste of survival. Nathan, bless him, always gravitated toward people who sparkled a little too bright. And Lena sparkled, but it was the kind of shimmer you saw on broken glass. Still, I tried. I invited her to my book club, even though she never read past the cover. I cooked her roast chicken every Sunday. When she forgot my birthday 2 years in a row, I said nothing. When she showed up in expensive handbags but forgot rent was due, I smiled. That's what mothers do when they love their sons too much to speak hard truths. Nathan adored her, and that was enough. For a while. The first time something didn't feel right, I was baking. I remember it clearly: lemon tea cake cooling on the wire rack, a habit from years of feeding law clerks during long court trials. Lena had just dropped by. She said she missed the grandma smell of my kitchen even though she wasn't a mother yet. She laughed when she said it, but it didn't reach her eyes. She asked me about my mortgage, whether it was fully paid off, said it must feel good to own something outright in a city like this. I answered without thinking. Yes, it was paid for over a decade now. Albert and I had made sure of that before cancer took him. Then she asked half-jokingly if I'd ever consider refinancing to help out family. I laughed, not unkindly, but firmly. She changed the subject. 2 weeks later, I got a call from the bank. They wanted to verify my income for a home equity loan application, one I never made. My heart didn't sink. It dropped like a stone. You don't spend 40 years in estate law without developing a sixth sense for fraud. And this one, it smelled like perfume and cheap desperation. Could you confirm your employer, Mrs. Delacroix? The voice asked. I'm 74, I said. I've been retired for 11 years. A pause. Then, it says here, you're a financial consultant with monthly income of $8,000. That's when I asked them to email me a scanned copy of the application. I didn't breathe as I opened the PDF. The moment I saw it, I knew. It was my name, my social security number. Even the signature looked nearly perfect. She'd studied it well. But the handwriting, it wasn't mine. No one told me what to feel in that moment. You'd think I'd cry or rage or call Nathan and scream, but I didn't. I sat there in my quiet little kitchen with my lemon tea cake untouched, and I stared at that application like it was a crime scene. Because it was. My body didn't move, but my mind started building an outline like the ones I used to draft before litigation. A plan, a strategy, and one unshakable truth at the center. She had taken my name, so I would give her something back, something she couldn't return. The first thing I did was nothing. That's always step one when you've been wronged and you know it, especially when the person who hurt you expects a reaction. Silence is disarming. It unravels the confidence of manipulators like wind pulling at the hem of a curtain. They can't see you, and that terrifies them. Lena expected fireworks, maybe even a confrontation. I gave her lemon tea cake and small talk. The day after the loan application fiasco, she showed up at my house unannounced, holding a bottle of wine and that sugary smile that always reminded me of honey hiding something sour underneath. I was just in the area, she said. Thought I'd see how you were doing. I looked at her closely. She wore a camel-colored coat, designer shoes. Her nails were manicured to a shine. She looked every inch the successful young wife, except for the tiniest flicker in her eyes. Not guilt, anticipation. She was checking to see if the bank had called me, and I gave her nothing. Perfect timing, I said, opening the door wide. I just made chamomile tea. We sat in the living room, the one Albert and I had curated together over 4 decades. I'd left everything intact after he passed. His law books on the shelf, the antique globe he bought at an estate auction in Paris. Lena admired none of it. She sipped her tea and glanced at her phone every few minutes. I let her stew. I asked about Nathan's job, about her family. She answered politely, but her foot tapped beneath the coffee table. She wasn't here for conversation. She was here for confirmation. And I wouldn't give it. When she left, she kissed me on the cheek. "You're always so calm," she whispered. "And you're always in such a hurry," I replied, smiling gently. After she left, I called Emma, my oldest friend, the one who still worked at the county clerk's office. "Frances," she said, her voice warm. "You never call unless something's on fire." "Not fire," I said. "Just smoke." Emma chuckled. "Come in tomorrow. Bring whatever paperwork you've got." I slept well that night. Not because I wasn't hurt, but because hurt in women like me eventually crystallizes into clarity. The next morning, I gathered every file I could find: property deeds, my original mortgage paperwork, even my signature card from the bank. I made copies. I wrote notes in the margins. When you've spent your life building legal cases, preparing a defense becomes second nature. Emma met me at her desk with 2 coffees and a raised brow. "Who are we going to destroy today?" she asked, half jokingly. "Not destroy," I said. "Redirect." We looked up the loan in the county system. It hadn't posted yet. It was still in underwriting. But the forged documents had passed first review. If I hadn't caught it in time, they would have funded it within days. Emma's mouth tightened. "You could press charges?" "I could," I said. "But I don't want her in jail." "You want her in debt?" "I want her in truth," I replied. "Debt is just the consequence." Emma leaned back. "You're still the scariest person I know." That afternoon, I made a quiet call to a legal contact who owed me a favor. Howard Lynn, estate litigator turned fraud specialist. I told him everything. He didn't interrupt once. At the end, he asked only one question: "Do you want this done fast or done elegantly?" I smiled. "Howard, you know me." He laughed. "Elegance it is." That night, I got a text from Nathan. "Lena said you seemed off today. Everything okay, Mom?" I stared at the message a long time before replying. "Everything is fine, sweetheart. Just clearing out some old records." Which wasn't a lie. Old records were exactly what I was clearing. And some new ones were about to be written with Lena's name on them. The air smelled like rain that morning. A soft drizzle pattered on my kitchen windows while I brewed coffee and reread the forged loan application for the 4th time. Each word, each false claim, each fabricated number. It was like watching someone take my life and rewrite it into a lie. My stomach turned as I traced the signature again. It was almost perfect. Almost. But she'd made one mistake. She curled the F in Frances too tightly, a habit I'd broken in law school. Lena must have copied my signature from an old card or legal form, not realizing it had evolved over time. That single error, a loop too sharp, was all I needed to prove. It wasn't me. But I wouldn't go to the police. I wasn't interested in revenge that came in handcuffs. I wanted something quieter, something that would stain longer. Howard called me later that day. "We're drafting a motion to formally disassociate your name from the fraudulent loan," he said. "But there's something else. I can file a secondary document. Quiet title action paired with civil redirection." "Meaning?" I asked, though I already knew. "Meaning we legally reassign the debt with evidence. It becomes hers. No court appearance. No scene." "Do it," I said. "Frances." He paused. "You understand what you're doing?" "Yes." "This isn't a passive move." "I'm not a passive woman," I replied. After the call, I began preparing for Lena's unraveling. First, I gathered every email, voicemail, and text from Lena that even hinted at money. A year ago, she asked me about co-signing a business credit card. I'd said no clearly and saved the thread. She once jokingly texted, "You're the only rich one in this family." It wasn't much, but it would form a psychological trail. Intent. Familiarity. Pattern. I bought a new safe. Quietly. No digital tracking, paid cash. Then I drafted a notarized affidavit stating that I had not under any circumstances applied for or approved any loan in my name within the past 5 years. I included handwriting samples, original signature records, and a sworn timeline. Howard reviewed it. "This will burn through paper," he said. "And if she contests it—" "She won't," I said. "She doesn't know yet that I know. And by the time she does, it'll be too late." That weekend, Nathan invited me to dinner. Just us, he said. Lena's at a retreat with her girlfriends. Perfect. He cooked. God bless him. He tried, and we sat in his apartment over chicken that was mostly edible. Everything okay with you lately? He asked between bites. Of course, I said. Lena said you seemed distant. Maybe I've been thinking more, I offered. Some things don't feel quite right these days. He smiled faintly. You're always thinking. I looked at my son and wondered what he knew, what he suspected. I saw no guilt in his eyes, only concern. Genuine concern. He wasn't part of this. That hurt more than anything because he would be collateral damage in what came next. He handed me a glass of wine and said, I know she's a lot sometimes, but she loves you. You know. I nodded. Of course she does. He believed that, truly. The next morning, I made a quiet visit to the bank. I knew the manager. We'd played bridge together years ago. I asked to meet privately and handed him a sealed file. When he opened it and saw what was inside copies of the forged application, the affidavit Howard's motion, and notarized evidence, his mouth tightened. Do you want to press criminal charges? No, I said. But I want the institution to know what happened. And I want the loan reassigned to its rightful applicant. We'll pull the funding process immediately, he assured me. This won't be forgotten. I'm counting on it. That evening, Lena came back from her retreat. She posted a picture of herself in a robe glass of champagne in hand, with the caption, Hard work deserves soft moments. I saved the post. Because even when you're erasing someone's name from your debt, it's helpful to show the world how relaxed you are. It plays better when the fall comes. The next move would be quiet. Final, permanent. She took my name. I was about to give it back in a way she would never forget. It happened on a Wednesday. Mid-morning, crisp sky, and the kind of chill that makes your hands feel older than they are. I was at home sitting by the window with my knitting in my lap, though I hadn't touched a stitch. The silence in the house wasn't hollow anymore. It was charged. At precisely 10, Zoita. Lena called me. I let it ring twice before answering. Francis, she said, her voice edged with panic wrapped in fake calm. Hi. Quick question. Did you get any weird mail from the bank or something? I leaned back into the chair. Mail? No, not that I can recall. Why? There was a pause. Oh, weird. I got a voicemail this morning. Something about needing to verify the applicant. I thought they might have sent something to you by mistake. I kept my voice flat. Applicant for what? For something Nathan and I were looking into. Just a mortgage inquiry. Probably nothing. A mortgage. I echoed cool as the porcelain teacup in my hand. I thought you two were renting until next year. Oh yeah, we are. It's just pre-approval talk. You know how it is. I do, I said. And I hung up. Not rudely. Not with anger. I simply said, take care, dear, and pressed the red button. 10 minutes later, Nathan called. Mom, what's going on? Shouldn't I be asking you that? Lena's freaking out. Says you're acting weird. Nathan, I said gently, has your wife been honest with you? There was silence. Then a faint, about what? I didn't answer. Just let the question hang like fog between us. I don't know. He finally admitted. Is this about money? I gave him a lifeline. Maybe it's just confusion. But if you find anything in your records with my name on it, I'd like to know. I'll check, he said, and I'll call you tonight. He didn't, but Lena did. An hour later, she was at my door. No warning, no knock. Just standing there in my garden path in a leather jacket and expensive boots, eyes wild and mouth ready to lie. I opened the door slowly. You need to explain what you're doing, she said before I even said hello. Come in, I said, stepping aside. I have tea. I don't want tea, she snapped. I do, I replied, walking into the kitchen. She followed, simmering. I don't know what you told the bank, but they're saying the application had issues. That it didn't pass verification. Is that so? They said someone disputed the identity, that a formal complaint was filed. And now there's an affidavit with your name on it. I poured tea into 2 cups. She didn't touch hers. Why would you do that? She asked. I met her gaze evenly. Why would I need to? She paused. For just a second, the mask slipped. Her voice lowered. Look, I Maybe I just wanted to speed things up. Nathan and I have plans. You know, we've worked so hard and you've always had access to more. I stared at her quiet. You don't understand, she went on. You don't know what it's like to feel stuck, to need help and have no one offer it. I understand exactly what it's like, I said. I just never stole to fix it. Her cheeks flushed. I didn't steal, she said quickly. It was going to benefit all of us. Nathan, you forged my signature? I cut in voice, still soft. You lied about my income. You faked an entire financial profile. I was going to pay it back, she said. You wouldn't have even noticed once the loan came through. Do you know what a felony is, Lena? That stopped her. This isn't a Netflix drama, I continued. It's federal fraud. Wire fraud. Identity theft. You're lucky I'm not prosecuting. Her voice cracked. Then what are you doing? I'm returning the gift, I said. She blinked. What? I slid a small envelope across the table. Inside, a single notarized document reassigning full liability of the attempted loan application to Lena Fairchild based on new evidence and a formal dispute. I don't want this, she said. You already signed it, I said. You just didn't realize. Her lips trembled. You can't do this. I can, I said. And I did. She stood up fast, knocking the tea. It spilled over the table, a thin stream running toward the edge, clear but irreversible. You think Nathan will still talk to you after this? She hissed. I smiled gently. I think Nathan deserves to know the woman who shares his bed forged his mother's name. She stared at me, shocked, shaking, speechless. Then she left. No apology, no remorse, just retreat. Which was fine, because the storm wasn't over. It had just passed through me. Now it was heading for her. The house was quiet after Lena left, but not the kind of quiet that feels lonely. It was the kind of quiet that follows a slammed door, sharp, cleansing, and final. I didn't rush to clean the spilled tea. I let it dry on the table, a faint watermark of what had boiled over. Let it stay there, I thought. A reminder. I spent the next hour reading in the sunroom, letting the world turn outside without me. I didn't have to do anything. The papers were signed. The redirection was filed. The loan process was fully halted, and the fraud investigation was closed in favor of private arbitration, thanks to the connections I still held and the quiet favors I had never cashed in. Lena, on the other hand, was beginning to feel the ground soften beneath her feet. I got the next clue from Emma. She called in the early evening. She made a call to the registrar's office today, Emma said, asking if any complaints had been filed in her name. She was nervous. Did you tell her anything? Of course not, Emma replied. I'm not your friend for nothing. I smiled. No, you're not. The next day, the bank manager sent me an update. The debt had officially been reassigned to Lena Fairchild. Her credit would reflect the application. Her name would bear the lien. And any attempt to file further documentation using my credentials would flag the system permanently. But I wasn't finished. I was never the kind of woman to leave something 95% done. There was one last step. I went to the courthouse records archive, the dusty old building where Albert and I used to file trusts and inheritance documents decades ago. The smell of aged paper and faint ink brought back something fierce in me. I requested a safety deposit box, new untraceable private. Into it, I placed the original affidavit, a full copy of the legal reassignment, and a handwritten note. I sealed them in an envelope labeled simply, for Lena. Then I walked 2 blocks to Howard's office. I handed him a second envelope. This is for her as well. No, I said. This is for Nathan. Howard nodded. Want me to deliver it? Not yet, I said. Let's wait. Because some lessons don't work unless they're timed like clockwork. 2 days later, Lena called again. This time she didn't sound angry. She sounded exhausted. Her voice shook. They've started calling me the collectors. Yes. And my credit score dropped by 200 points. Francis, I didn't know it would happen this fast. You thought consequences had grace periods. I was desperate. I paused. And now, I don't know what to do. I could have offered help, money, forgiveness. Instead, I said, there's a deposit box at Crestwood Bank. You'll find a key arriving in your mailbox today. She was quiet for a moment. What's in it? Something you owe. And something you need to learn. Click. No goodbye. I imagined her going to the bank, sitting in that sterile room, the box in front of her, opening it with hands she once used to forge my name. She would find the document, the legal reassignments, my letter, and the note which read, "When you wear another woman's name like armor, remember, she once chose it with care. You stole my name, so I gave you its weight." Later that night, I received a message. No words, just a picture of the envelope, torn. Beside it, the tea-stained scarf she had worn during our first Thanksgiving together. That was her apology, or maybe just her surrender. I never responded, because some apologies arrive too late to matter. The fallout wasn't immediate. It was slow, like a leak behind a wall, hidden at first, then cracking the paint, warping the floorboards until everything began to collapse from the inside. Lena disappeared from family gatherings. No more surprise visits. No more birthday brunches with her obligatory bottle of wine. The woman who once inserted herself into every photo frame had gone radio silent. And Nathan, poor soul, was trying to hold the picture together with trembling hands. He came by a week later, unannounced, just like her. He looked older than the last time I saw him. "Hey, Mom," he said as I opened the door. "Can we talk?" I nodded and stepped aside. He didn't sit, just stood in the living room, glancing at the bookshelf, the fireplace, the photo of his father that still stood on the mantel. "Lena's been off," he said. "I don't know what's going on with her. She's been quiet, panicked. She barely talks to me." "She knows why I said." Nathan turned. "I want to ask something, but I'm not sure I want the answer." I met his gaze. "Ask anyway. Did she really do something? To you? Something serious?" I took a breath, and for a moment I felt the mother in me rise. The part that wanted to protect him, shield him from the truth. But that part had already done enough damage. "She used my name to apply for a loan," I said plainly. "She forged my signature, lied about my finances, and tried to pull money from under my feet while smiling at my table." His jaw clenched. "I didn't know." "I believe you." "I swear I didn't." "Nathan," I interrupted gently. "I believe you." He sank into the armchair, burying his face in his hands. "I feel like a fool," he whispered. "You're not. Love makes fools of all of us, even me." He stayed there silent, letting the weight settle on his shoulders. I made tea this time without ceremony and set it beside him. "I should have seen it," he said finally. "The spending, the secrecy, the way she spoke about money, like it was owed to her. People show you who they are in the little things," I said. "The big betrayals are just final confirmations." He looked up. "What happens now?" "That's not my decision," I said. "It's yours." He left an hour later with red eyes and a half-full mug of cold tea. I didn't ask if he'd speak to her. I didn't tell him what to do, because this wasn't about Lena anymore. It was about the woman I had become, the woman who had quietly drawn a line and refused to be crossed again. A week passed. Then 2. No calls, no texts. Then late one night, a letter arrived in the mail. No return address. Inside, a single piece of lined paper torn from a notebook. "Loans can be repaid, but respect can't be bought back. Lesson learned." It wasn't signed, but I knew, and I didn't need a signature to recognize truth. The next morning, I cleaned the tea stain from the dining table. It had dried to a soft outline like a shadow that had overstayed its welcome. I wiped it away gently, not because I wanted to forget, but because I was ready to remember on my own terms. I always believed that silence wasn't just the absence of noise. It was a presence, a weight, a language that only certain people understood. After Lena vanished from our lives, silence moved in like an old friend. Not uncomfortable, just observant, watching what we would do with the space she left behind. Nathan kept coming by. Not often, not predictably, but enough. Sometimes he brought groceries. Sometimes he just sat with me and said nothing at all. It was those visits I cherished most, where neither of us had to fill the air with apologies or explanations. I found a credit card bill he told me one evening, staring into his tea. It had charges I never made. Bags, shoes, plane tickets. All while I thought we were saving. "You were," I said. He nodded, voice low. How did I not see it? "Because when you love someone, you make sense of everything that doesn't." He exhaled. "And when it doesn't make sense anymore, you stop explaining." and you start protecting what's left of yourself. That night, he hugged me longer than usual. And when he left, I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen in months. Relief. Not because things were okay, but because he knew the truth now. And the truth, even when painful, has a way of stitching the soul back together. A few days later, I went to the safe deposit box one last time. It had served its purpose. Lena had retrieved the documents. The bank had archived the transaction. The law had worked as intended, not as a hammer, but as a mirror. Quiet, precise, irreversible. I removed the last item from the box. A photograph. It was from Christmas 4 years ago. Nathan had just married Lena. She was standing next to me wearing red lipstick and a smile that hadn't yet calcified into calculation. My hand was on her shoulder. My smile was real. I stared at the photo a long time. Then I tore it clean down the center, not out of rage, but because some pictures no longer deserve to be whole. By the end of the month, a new rumor spread in Lena's circle. She'd been denied a business loan. Something about poor credit, a disputed lien, a failed application still dragging her score down. She'd tried explaining it to her friends, but no one really bought the story. Because the truth was never written in her words. It was etched in mine. I didn't feel victorious. I felt still, like the surface of a pond after a storm has passed. On a soft spring morning, I hosted my book club again for the first time in months. Emma brought lemon cake. I figured we'd come full circle, she said with a wink. Only if it's not stolen, I said, and we laughed. I told them the whole story. Every detail, every silence, every letter, every signature. When I finished, the room was quiet, not out of shock, but admiration. Frances, one of the women, whispered. That wasn't revenge. That was an education. I raised my teacup. Let's hope she learned. But inside, I wasn't toasting Lena. I was toasting myself for remembering who I was and proving that quiet women aren't weak. We're just patient, and we never sign what we can rewrite. It was around this time that I started going through old case files. Not from the courts, my own. Personal histories, letters, journals. Every file folder tucked into the back of my hallway cabinet labeled with neat little tabs that read things like Nathan College Fund or Albert Retirement Planning, all the life I had lived organized in Manila. And there, tucked deep beneath a stack of tax forms and notarized documents, I found something I hadn't seen in over 20 years. A letter from Albert. He had written it the year before he died. I hadn't forgotten about it, not exactly, but I suppose I had tucked it away like everything else that was too tender to hold. It read, Frances, if you're reading this, it means I didn't get to say goodbye properly. I want you to know your strength was never in your logic, your lists, or your law books. It was in your silence, in the way you waited until the moment mattered, in the way you never raised your voice but made the room lean in to listen. Don't ever let anyone make you feel like that's weakness. It's your edge, and if anyone ever forgets it, make them remember. With all my love, Albert. I folded the letter and wept, not because I was sad, but because I had honored him in every pause, every restrained breath, every document filed in silence. He would have been proud. The next week, I received a call from Crestwood Legal Services. Apparently, Lena had tried to contest the reassignment. Briefly, she'd walked into their office, flustered, claiming she hadn't known what she'd signed, that she was manipulated, coerced, that she thought the loan was a family matter. The woman on the phone paused before continuing. She said, "You set her up," she told me. "Did I?" I asked calmly. She didn't provide any evidence. Just emotion. I exhaled slowly. That's usually what the guilty bring to court when they have no proof. The woman chuckled. We agreed. Her case was dismissed before it even started. Thank you, I said. Frances, if you ever want to teach a masterclass in legal grace, let me know. We'd all take notes. I smiled. Just send me the final paperwork. That night, Nathan came over again. He sat at the dining table, the same one Lena had once spilled tea on, and placed a small box in front of me. I thought you should have this, he said. I opened it. Inside, Lena's wedding ring, the one we'd helped him afford, the one she insisted be platinum, even though she claimed money didn't matter. He didn't say anything else, and he didn't need to. We ate quietly, talked about nothing important, watched the birds from the window. And when he left, I slipped the ring into a drawer with the letter from Albert and the torn photo. Not because it meant something, but because it no longer did. People often say that time heals things. I disagree. Time doesn't heal anything. It just stretches the pain until you can fold it small enough to fit inside yourself without screaming. What heals is truth. What heals is action. What heals is knowing you didn't let them win, not loudly, but thoroughly. Because some women scream, and others sign, and some of us, we do both. But we never sign without reading the fine print first. It was a Tuesday afternoon when she came back. Not into my home, no. That door would never open for her again. But into my space, my world, the orbit she once tried to dominate with charm and manipulation. She showed up at my church. I had just finished helping the ladies fold donation blankets. We were talking about peach cobbler recipes when I saw her standing near the back pew out of place like a stain on a clean page. Her coat was oversized. Her lipstick was gone. She looked smaller, but her presence still radiated a kind of distorted urgency, the kind only people who haven't truly changed carry with them like perfume. I excused myself gently and walked over. "Francis," she said, as though we'd just parted ways over lunch. "Lena." Her eyes searched mine, looking for warmth, or maybe a window. I gave her nothing. I just wanted to talk. "I'm not here for conversation," I replied softly. "I'm here for community." She swallowed. "I know you probably hate me." "No," I said. "Hate takes energy. I've spent mine rebuilding what you tried to break." A pause. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for the fraud. Or for getting caught." That made her flinch. And for a moment I thought, maybe this was her breaking point. The moment of reckoning. But it wasn't. Her next words proved it. "Nathan left me," she said, voice shaking. I nodded. "He'll be all right. I'm not asking for him. I'm asking for you. I gave you everything I had to give Lena. Kindness, trust, forgiveness. You mistook them for permission." Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't reach for her. Because I knew the difference between sorrow and strategy. "I'm drowning, Francis. And I threw you the rope?" I said. "You tried to wrap it around my throat." Silence. Then she asked something I never expected. "Why didn't you ruin me?" I looked her dead in the eye. "Because you're not worth the ruins." She blinked, stunned. "I wanted you to live in it," I said. "To walk through every day carrying the debt you thought I'd shoulder. I wanted you to feel what it's like when the name you used to steal becomes the name they use when collecting." She shook her head slowly. "You're colder than I thought." "No," I said quietly. "I'm cleaner." She didn't respond, just turned and walked out of the church. I watched her go, not with bitterness, not with triumph, with peace, because the worst part of betrayal isn't the loss. It's the realization that someone you let close saw your silence as emptiness instead of restraint. And now Lena was learning. That silence has teeth. I never planned to give her anything else. But sometimes closure isn't just for the one who caused the damage, it's for the one who survived it. A week after that strange encounter at church, I mailed Lena a package. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even a message. It was a box. Inside, one of Albert's old law journals, a used calculator, and a simple wooden pen, the one she once borrowed during Thanksgiving to sign the guest book. The one that disappeared and later reappeared on my desk when I discovered the forged loan. And on top of it all, a note in my handwriting that read, "Use what's left. Build what you can. You've already stolen enough. No signature. No return address. No mercy." I didn't send it out of cruelty. I sent it out of clarity. If she ever found a way to rebuild her life, it would not be with my silence. It would be with the wreckage she'd made for herself. She would have to climb out of it knowing exactly what she had destroyed and who let her walk away with the lesson instead of the jail sentence. The day after the package was delivered, I walked past my study and paused by the window. Outside, the mailbox stood still under the breeze, unopened. But inside, I felt something shift. Not relief, not pride, just completion. As if the final chapter had written itself and closed softly in the margins of my mind. I went to my bookshelf and pulled down Albert's favorite volume on ethical litigation. Inside was a quote he'd underlined decades ago. Justice is not the sword. It is the scale. Balance is what endures. I traced the faded ink with my finger. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I wrote, not legal briefs, not affidavits, not defenses, but pages of everything I'd been holding in. What it felt like to be betrayed by family, to be dismissed, to be underestimated by a woman who thought age was weakness and kindness was permission. What it felt like to win quietly in a world that only applauds noise. I didn't know if I was writing a letter, or a testimony, or a confession. But I filled 6 pages in one sitting. When I finished, I tucked them into a folder and labeled it in careful script. For Nathan, if he ever asks. Later that evening, I found myself in my backyard garden trimming the lavender by the edge of the fence. That's when I saw him, Nathan. He was standing by the gate holding a box. Found some of your old books in the attic, he said. Thought you'd want them back. I opened the gate. He stepped through. We didn't talk about her. We didn't need to. Instead, we sat on the bench under the plum tree and watched the sun melt into the grass. After a while, he said, "You handled this better than I ever could." I smiled softly. That's because I've had more time to be broken, and more time to learn how to rebuild. He looked at me, really looked at me, and said the one thing I never expected to hear. I think I finally understand who you are. I blinked, surprised. And who's that? He reached for my hand. You're not the woman who lets life happen to her. You're the woman life waits for, because it knows you'll handle it when no one else can. I squeezed his hand gently, not because he was right, but because he finally knew he was. It was a curious thing watching the ripples Lena left behind slowly settle into still water. Not because the damage wasn't deep, but because I had reinforced every inch of myself in the aftermath. No more assuming people meant well just because they used words like family. No more giving away trust like spare change. What surprised me most wasn't how easily Lena had tried to steal from me. It was how quickly others had believed her story. People I'd once had dinner with, neighbors, even some of Nathan's friends. They didn't come out and accuse me, but I saw it in their sideways glances, in the hesitations at the grocery store, in the way invitations stopped arriving in my mailbox, as though her lie had spread before my truth even had time to stretch. But truth, real truth, is like spring. It always comes back even after the most brutal winter. I didn't chase it. I didn't correct the whispers. I let the facts do the talking. Because Lena may have weaponized my name, but I'd fortified my legacy. I was walking past the community center bulletin board one afternoon when I saw it. A flyer for a financial literacy workshop for young women, organized by a local mentorship group, sponsored by a local law firm. At the bottom of the list of speakers, I saw a name I hadn't heard in months. Lena Fairchild. I stopped, stared, and God help me, I laughed. Not a mocking laugh. Not bitter, just amused. She was reinventing herself, again. And this time she'd chosen the angle of redemption. I took out my phone and snapped a picture of the flyer. Not to use against her, not to share, but to keep as proof, not of her growth, but of my restraint. That evening I got a call from the bank. A young voice, nervous. Mrs. Delacroix. I just wanted to confirm your participation in our annual Legacy Trust luncheon next month. Oh, I replied. I didn't realize I was on the list. You're one of the keynote speakers, she said, then paused. Actually, you're our closing speaker. I smiled. I see. You'll be talking about the long-term impact of reputation, she said, reading from a script. How to protect your name in a world where it can be stolen in seconds. I nearly laughed again. Sounds perfect, I said. Put me down. When the day arrived, I wore Navy Albert's favorite color. I stood in a clean, modern conference room. A crowd of professionals, young and old lawyers and families, executives and students, all looking up at the podium where I stood. And I told them everything. Not the names, not the details, but the essence of what it feels like when someone you love rewrites you. Of how the law isn't just for punishment, but for reclamation. Of how silence used well can be the most powerful form of evidence. At the end of my speech, they rose and clapped, not out of politeness, but because they'd heard the truth and recognized the echo of their own battles inside it. Afterward, a young woman came up to me. She couldn't have been more than 25. Nervous hands, determined eyes. "I didn't know women like you existed," she said. I smiled gently. "Oh, we exist," I told her. "We've just learned to make less noise and more impact." She hugged me, and in that moment I knew I hadn't just survived Lena. I'd surpassed her. Not through revenge, but through resonance. It had been nearly 6 months since the loan debacle when I saw her again. Not in person. On television? A late-night segment on local public access profiling women rebuilding after financial setbacks. There she was seated on a navy velvet chair, her hair tied back modestly, a soft, neutral-toned blazer replacing her usual designer flash. Her voice trembled artfully. "I made mistakes," she said. "But I believe every mistake can become a foundation." I didn't flinch, didn't shout at the screen, didn't throw the remote like I once might have in my younger, wilder days. Instead, I turned the volume down and watched her mouth move in silence. Nathan called not long after. "Did you see her?" I did. "She's reinventing again." "She always will," I said. "You think people will believe her?" "Some will. People like clean stories, redemption arcs, neat bows on messy lives. And you, what do you think?" I leaned back in my chair. "I think she's telling a new story using pieces she stole from an old one." Nathan didn't answer right away. Then, "You should have ruined her." I smiled faintly. "I did. Not enough." "No," I said. "Just right." That same week, I received a letter in the mail. No return address, but the envelope was familiar. Inside, a check, $1,000, and a post-it note. A start. No name. But I knew. I tore the check in half twice over and threw it in the fireplace. Because restitution without remorse is just another manipulation. You can't pay back character. You can't refund betrayal. Spring turned to summer, and with the warmth came something new. A letter from the Women's Legal Aid Center. They'd read my speech. Someone had sent it in. They wanted me to speak again. Not just once. As a recurring voice for older women navigating financial betrayal, I agreed. Not because I needed the recognition, but because I wanted anyone to know what to do the next time someone used love as a mask for theft. My first session was quiet. 10 women, each older than 50, each carrying a different scar. A daughter who drained her mother's account, a son who stole her house, a nephew who mortgaged his aunt's retirement. They didn't want vengeance. They wanted permission to stop being silent. And I gave it to them, not by shouting, but by teaching, because survival isn't loud. It's measured, it's precise, and it's contagious. At the end of that first class, one woman stayed behind. Her name was Eileen, 72, eyes like mine. "My daughter used my name to buy a car," she said. "She's not sorry, just mad she got caught." I nodded. "I want to fix it," she whispered. "But I don't want to hate her." "You don't have to hate her," I said. "You just have to stop letting her write your story." Eileen smiled, and something broke open in both of us. It wasn't just about debt anymore. It was about dignity. Theirs. And mine. I walked home that night with the wind at my back. No weight on my chest. No regrets in my steps. Just one thought looping in my mind like a soft song. Lena thought she stole something from me. But what she really gave me was a voice I never knew I had. I never told Nathan about the check. Some things, even when symbolic, aren't worth passing on. Especially not to sons who are still learning how to carry their own shadows. Instead, I focused on what came next. The second class at the Women's Legal Aid Center doubled in size. I walked in expecting a quiet room and found instead a sea of nods, notebooks, and women who had stopped apologizing for being angry. One brought her granddaughter. One had just divorced a man who'd been siphoning from her account for years. One simply said, "I'm here because I'm tired of being invisible." We talked about power of attorney. We talked about family fraud. We talked about what happens when your name becomes a tool and how to sharpen it back into a weapon of self-worth. And then we shared stories. One by one. There was laughter. There were tears. There was rage that turned into relief. And in the middle of it all, I saw my own journey mirrored in theirs. Not in the details, but in the quiet evolution from silenced to sovereign. After the session, I lingered by the door, unsure why I didn't want to leave yet. That's when the director approached me. "We've had some calls," she said, "from other centers." "Oh, they want you to come speak." I blinked. "To who?" "Women. Retirees. Divorcees. Survivors. They said your name came up a lot." I smiled softly. "That's ironic." "You don't have to say yes," she added. "But it's clear you've built something people need." I thought about that. Not just the invitation, but the implication. I hadn't just ended a chapter with Lena, I'd started a movement. Later that week, Nathan came by again. He brought groceries he always did now and a single envelope. He placed it gently on the table. "What's this?" I asked. "It's the annulment papers," he said. "I signed them." I stared at him, unsure whether to reach out or stay still. "She tried to negotiate," he said. "Said she deserved something for the time she invested in our marriage." "And what did you say?" He looked at me with eyes that had learned how to harden. I said I already paid the price and my mother paid the interest. My breath caught. "You're becoming very good at this," I said softly. "I had a good teacher." We didn't talk about her after that. Not again. Not ever. It was a warm Sunday morning when the call came. Emma, always quick and always dramatic. "You're not going to believe this," she said. "I rarely do," I replied, smiling. She applied for another loan. Under her own name this time. Yes. And she was denied. Too much liability. Too many red flags. I nodded. "Makes sense." She listed you as a personal reference. That made me laugh. Full, unfiltered laughter that filled the kitchen like fresh bread baking. "Did she think I'd vouch for her?" Emma chuckled. "I don't think she thought at all." I thanked her and hung up. I stood by the window watching the world move quietly on the street below. No sirens, no headlines, no fireworks, just peace. Because sometimes justice isn't about winning. It's about watching someone who underestimated you learn over and over again that silence doesn't mean surrender. It means preparation. Summer gave way to autumn, and with it came a new rhythm. I wasn't chasing closure anymore. I had already stitched it into my life, one small action at a time. The tea kettle still whistled every morning. The porch still caught the afternoon sun. And the woman staring back at me in the mirror, she stood taller now. One morning, as I was organizing files in the cabinet, trying to decide what to keep and what to let go, I found the envelope I had once labeled. "For Nathan, if he ever asks." 6 pages of ink. Truths I wrote when my heart was still raw. Words I thought he might someday need to read. But now as I held it in my hand, I realized he didn't need them anymore. He had lived the truth. He had grown from it. He had seen who I was, not because I handed him a script, but because I showed him every step of the way. I tore the letter in half, then into quarters, then fed the pieces one by one into the fireplace until they turned to soft ash and heat. Let the past warm the present, but never weigh it down. That evening, I went out for dinner, alone, something I hadn't done in years. I wore my navy coat. The one Albert used to say made me look like I ran a court of charity and a corporation all before breakfast. I sat by the window of a quiet little bistro, ordered a glass of red wine, and watched people pass by on the sidewalk. I didn't think about Lena. I didn't think about the loan. I didn't even think about the lie. I thought about lavender, and lemon cake, and my book club, and what it means to live in a body that has carried grief, betrayal, and still wakes up in the morning with grace. Halfway through my meal, a woman approached my table. She was in her 50s, cautious but firm. "Excuse me," she said, "are you Frances Delacroix?" "I am." She smiled nervously. "I attended one of your workshops at the Aid Center. I just wanted to say thank you. What you said, it changed everything for me." I nodded gently. "What changed?" "I stopped co-signing things I didn't believe in. Financially, emotionally, legally, personally." I raised my glass. "To reclaiming your name." She smiled and returned to her table. And I sat there, wine in hand, heart full, not with vengeance, not with vindication, but with something far more dangerous to those who once underestimated me. Legacy. When I got home that night, Nathan had left something on my porch. A bouquet of lilies, and a handwritten note that said, "For everything you did, and everything you didn't let them take. I brought the flowers inside, arranged them in my mother's vase, and lit a candle, not for grief, for gratitude, because I had survived the storm not by fighting the wind, but by building a foundation no one could steal. It happened quietly, just like everything else in this story. No fanfare, no headline, just a digital notice that popped up in my inbox one morning. Loan account 0457 status. Closed. Responsibility. Settled in full. It wasn't mine, of course. It was Lena's. Apparently, she'd finally paid it off. Whether it was out of guilt, fear, or desperation, I didn't know. And I didn't care. Because that debt had never truly been about money. It had always been about identity. And now she no longer held mine. I sat at my desk, the morning sun creeping slowly across the carpet, touching the edge of Albert's old globe. That globe had been with me through everything. A symbol of the world we built together. A world of order, of law, of loyalty. And that world had been tested. But it had not fallen. That afternoon, I took a walk through the neighborhood. The trees had begun to blush those brilliant reds and oranges that only autumn can produce. As I passed familiar houses, a few people nodded to me in a way they hadn't in years. Not out of pity, out of recognition. It wasn't just that the rumors had faded. It was that my silence had told the story better than any defense could. I didn't shout. I didn't smear. I just lived with integrity louder than any lie could last. At the library, the director stopped me at the door. "We were wondering," she said, "would you consider leading a monthly series for retired women? Not just legal talks, life talks." I smiled. What would I call it? She shrugged. "Whatever you want." I thought for a moment, and then said, "Let's call it The Name You Keep." When I got home, I made tea, chamomile my old friend, and sat by the window. And I wrote. Not for the courts, not for the banks, not for the justice system. I wrote for me. A new journal, a new first page, a new chapter that began not with betrayal, but with strength. I titled the entry, "The Gift I Never Wanted and What I Did with It," because that's what it had been in the end. A gift wrapped in deception, handed to me in silence, and returned in full, transformed with interest. Lena used my name, but she never understood its weight. Now she does. And I wear it with pride. Clean, unbroken, and entirely mine. Some stories end with fireworks. Mine ended with a signature, not the one she forged. The one I gave with clarity, without fear, without apology. Because survival for women like me isn't loud. It's ledger quiet. It's line by line. It's walking through fire in good shoes and emerging with not a hair out of place. She thought I was weak because I waited. But waiting isn't weakness. It's strategy. It's giving someone enough rope not to hang themselves, but to realize they're the ones tying knots in the dark. She used my name like a key, but she didn't know I had changed the locks. Legally, quietly, permanently. And when she looked back, all she saw was the door closing, and the silence on the other side saying everything she never heard me say aloud. I didn't ruin her. I simply refused to protect her from the truth. Now I live softer, not because I lost, but because I no longer carry what wasn't mine to hold. And in the space she left behind, I found something far more valuable than revenge. My voice, my peace, and a name that no one will ever use without permission again. So if someone ever tries to write you out of your own life, pick up the pen and write the next chapter in ink they can't erase. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to Grace's Truth, and share this story with someone who's still finding their strength in silence. Because sometimes the quietest women make the loudest legacy.